although I'm new to the role, and I will readily admit I'm still kind of finding my way, so if I say something that doesn't seem quite right with what you know the program to be, please stop me so that I can be corrected, because I'm still in the process of doing my deep dive into all of the programs and the curriculum, learning objectives and courses and everything else. So although I'm new to the role, I'm not necessarily new to Champlain. I've been an adjunct since 2014, so I do have some familiarity. Although being on the other side of the equation in the role that I'm in now, I'm finding is completely different than being just an adjunct. Not to minimize what our adjuncts do, but it's a very different role and experience for me. And of course, most of you know that I came into being an adjunct with 20 years experience in the field as an IT consultant, and then also working in cybersecurity, doing risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, analysis, and as well digital forensics. I've been doing that for quite some time, so a little bit of background. Thank you to all of you for being here. Before I provide you with basically an overview of the programs that all fall under the cybersecurity umbrella, I want to really give you a deep thank you for being here, because without you, the programs aren't possible. And really your attendance today demonstrates your commitment to our students, which is something that I've found since going from that adjunct role to the chair of the cybersecurity programs. Every single one of you and every single thing that you do all day, every day, is student focused. And that really, I think, is a testament to what makes Champlain fantastic for our students, but also as an institution. And that I see that in the cybersecurity when I've got an advisor, coming to me about a student issue, or I see it from Mark when he's coming to me and he's saying, is this student appropriate for this program? Every single thing that you do is student focused. So thank you, because by being here, it's just one more extension of that. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was that while we're, it's one of those things where in that shift for me, I came as an adjunct, and of course learning was important, education was important, but what I've really come to find out is that we're in the business of building relationships, and I think that that's something that I'd like to, and I'm hoping is conveyed through my presentation today, that it's really about getting to know basically why our students come here for the cybersecurity programs, the digital forensics programs, but then also knowing our students and then how those programs that we have are working to assist them to, basically further their education, but also maintain their careers or enhance their careers. So I'm going to do, let's see here, and I apologize. So I was asked to give you an overview of the cybersecurity programs. And I think that it's important when we talk about cybersecurity that we realize that I'm not just referring to the Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity. We have that degree, but we also have our certificate programs, and then we have all of those lovely acronyms. So we have CYBER, which is cybersecurity. We have CFDI, which is computer forensics and digital investigation. DFS, which is digital forensic science. And then OPSEC, which I'm not sure where the E went, other than somebody shortened it. That's something
use 4 letters.
When I got here, I'm like, it's OPSEC. They always say OPSEC, but where's the E? It's missing. I think a hacker stole it. So information security operations. My plan today is to basically take you on a walk through Champlain's cybersecurity landscape. And I'm not going to have any hackers. They're not going to show up in my presentation. I do expect some heckling as opposed to hackers, because I know all you guys. No worry, no malware, no incident response, nothing like that. So what I'm going to do is first give you an overview of the programs in general. Then I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about why our students are seeking positions in cybersecurity disciplines. I think that's important. It basically sets the stage and gives you a framework for why do they even come here and why do we have the programs. Because we can offer things, but if we don't have students who are going to take those programs and earn those degrees and those certificates, it's meaningless. Lastly, I want to...
Do the AT&T students fall under your...
They do.
They do.
Yes, because they have cybersecurity badges, and I'll be mentioning a little bit about the TrueEd and AT&T partnerships. And then lastly, basically I want to look at some of the courses that the students take, and specifically talk about the OPSEC Work Games capstone, because that's something new. It's only in its second term right now. And that, I think, is going to be a nice segue into the challenges that the programs are going to face basically as we move forward. So, let's see, introduction. So I mentioned briefly that we have several certificate and degree programs, and I think it's important that right now we kind of distinguish certificates from degree programs. So we've got the certificates, and those basically are designed so that people who don't want to, students who don't want to get a full degree can just focus on a discipline and earn a certificate. Or while they're getting their degree, they can reach milestones along the way. But also we have partnerships with TrueEd, for example. AT&T is a partner with us, and we offer specific certificates or badges to them as well. Within the programs, we have, switch to here so that you can see a little bit better. We've got the Cybersecurity Certificate, the Computer Forensic and Digital Investigation Certificate, Incident Response Certificate, and Software Security Certificate. There's also a System Admin Certificate in there, but a lot of that coursework falls under Bob. Within the cybersecurity program, we offer an undergraduate degree, which is our Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity. And then we also offer a Bachelor of Science in Computer Forensics and Digital Investigations. And then at the graduate level, we have the Master of Science in Digital Forensic Science and the Master of Science in Information Security Operations. So that's kind of the broad overview. And then as we move forward, I'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of each one of those. So why Champlain? And I think this is really one of the things that sets us apart. It's critically important for us to understand that based on what we offer, we have certain candidates who come to us and look for things. And so they seek out Champlain. And the reason, and it's pretty simple, the reason that they seek out Champlain, the why, so to speak, is because we're leaders in the cybersecurity space. And I've got up here just a couple of the things that we are, so I'll expand on those. And I think most of you have heard this at this point, so I'm speaking to an audience that knows this, but I think it's a good reminder. Twice our cybersecurity program has been named the nation's best by SC Magazine, and we've received the Professional Award for Best Cybersecurity Higher Education Program. And what that does is it recognizes us, basically, it's recognition for our cybersecurity and digital forensics programs, hard work, and continued dedication to protecting the enterprise from the evolving threat landscape. And there's going to be certain words that environment, landscape, threats that are consistent throughout the cybersecurity space. So it's evolving threat landscape that we're protecting. Then since 2006, Champlain has been designated as a National Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense Education by the National Security Agency and Department of Homeland Security. Basically, institutions that receive this designation must develop and maintain robust cybersecurity degree programs, which we do, that closely align with cybersecurity-related knowledge units, or KUs, that have been validated by top subject matter experts in the field. So it's not good enough that we've just, hey, we designed a program. We've actually designed that program and it's met these certain qualifications which then give us distinction within the field. Also, Champlain is designated as a National Center of Digital Forensics Academic Excellence by the Defense Cyber Crime Center Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And the one thing you'll find about all these designations is that the terminology that they use is really long, so it's a giant tongue twister. So in fact, we were the first school in the Northeast, the first private college, and the 5th higher education institution in the country to be honored with this distinction. So what these honors demonstrate, at least to me, and I think also to our students, is that Champlain is truly a leader in the cybersecurity space. We don't just say we are. And that, to me, is very, very important. We're not just saying we are, it's been proven that we are because it's been validated independently. And all of our programs have been reviewed by subject matter experts. So who are the students who come to our cybersecurity programs? And I have to thank the advisors because they really helped me with this, especially since I'm new, to frame who they are and why they're coming here. We have government employees, members of the military. There are also seasoned law enforcement officers, and those are primarily in the digital forensics realm of our programs. And then there are also individuals in the private sector. And in our master's programs, they are primarily male. And I say that just because I think it's important to identify that there aren't a lot of females who come into these programs. I mean, we see quite a few, but in general, you know, it's a male-dominated field. And so that's something that we're actually doing quite well in facilitating, having a lot of, you know, female students who are coming in as career changers, or they're going through the badge programs. And so that's pretty encouraging to me, because we have a skills gap that we're going to have to fill, and part of that solution is going to be bringing in people who would not normally be in the field into the field. So it's kind of a good experience to have that happening. Our students are also employed by our True Ed partners, like the many students that are employed by AT&T, who are enrolled in the cybersecurity badge programs. And for those of you who aren't aware of those, we have a special program where we've developed curriculum specific to AT&T's wants and needs. And we, let me see if I've got, okay, that we've developed them specific to AT&T's needs, and they can start out with a fundamentals badge, so they take a couple of courses. They take Foundation of Cybersecurity and Networking and Security, and when they do that, they can earn the fundamentals badge. After they've done that, they can decide, oh, I want to move on and get an advanced badge. So they do that by then taking our courses in mobile security, ethical hacking, emerging threats and defenses, and policy analysis and implementation. So we're building, and I think that's one thing you're going to see throughout, you know, the programs as I describe them, is that we've got the badge programs and those builds. So we start with the fundamentals, we go to advanced, then we go to gold. We have our undergrad, and we start off with basically our cybersecurity certificate, and then we build in each of those certificates as well based on where they are in the course curriculum. And then, of course, our master's programs stand alone, that we have the master's in information security operations as well as the digital forensics. So getting back to the AT&T, when they've taken those courses and earned their advanced badge, then they can take basically all 6 courses and they attain their gold badge for AT&T. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we've got a lot of adult learners in our student population, and some of the students who are coming here, they strictly do it because they want to better themselves. Or they maybe look, and by better themselves, I mean that they may want to move up in their organizations. We see that in the digital forensics programs, where they say, oh, I want to go from where I am now as a law enforcement officer up to doing digital forensics, and so they're taking courses so that they can do that. Or they're working for a government agency and they want to move laterally from one agency to another. And so they need that education component because the job requires them to have a degree. So they're coming in to obtain their degree so that they can move laterally. And then, of course, we've got the career changers who have decided, hey, I've watched NCIS and I think cybersecurity is cool, which of course it is. I'm biased, but they say it's, you know, it's cool, it looks great, there's a lot of openings in the field, they've heard about the skills gap, and they decide that's what I want to do. So they may be in a completely different discipline, and then they decide they want to come in and seek out the MS ISL. So that skills gap that I'm talking about, the skills gap that I've been talking about is pretty important, a pretty important component with how students perceive our program, and then also how our program aligns with the industry needs, which is something that is also a challenge. And it's also kind of the big topic of conversation other than breaches. Every time there's a giant breach, there's a lot in the news. And the same thing can be said for the skills gap, and I know at the conferences that I've attended in the last month, the skills gap was probably far and away the one topic of conversation that permeated every conversation at both of the conferences. Because we have so much going on in the industry, and there are so few people who are qualified to provide services and be successful job applicants. So a lot of times, the students, I think, they're seeing that and they're saying, great, I want to go get an education. So let's frame that skills gap and what it means for cybersecurity. Well, what that means is basically cybersecurity is part of everything that we do. If you've got a computer and you're using the internet, say you fall under the umbrella of cybersecurity. And that means that people who are coming into the industry can be from any discipline. And I personally like to enforce that. I don't see that you have to be a techie to come into cybersecurity. Does it help? Absolutely. But do you have to have that? No. If you have certain skills, problem solving, communication, then you can come into the industry and you can still make a difference. And there are certainly jobs that are available for you. Nationally and globally, we're facing that shortage of cybersecurity professionals. I would say that a reliable figure right now, basically, of the projected talent gap is about 1.8 million by 2020. I've heard upwards of 6 million. I think they're a little bit inflated even on a global scale, but a lot of that depends on what comes out, what's released to market technology-wise. Cybersecurity Ventures, they had a survey and they put the gap at 3.5 million jobs by 2021. And that gap, the skills gap, is mainly being caused by the influx of Internet of Things devices that are flooding into the consumer market as well as the industrial markets, all the sensors that they're using in industry. So that's really driving a lot of that skills gap. So definitely these numbers look good for the students who are graduating with bachelor's degrees in computer-related fields. And when I say that, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median pay for an information security analyst in 2016 was $92,600. So there's definitely a place to not only earn your degree, but then come into the field and make a difference, but also have it be financially viable. There were about 100,000 positions in 2016, and growth was, and this is just in that one position, so information security analyst, because the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics defines it is by position, and they kind of lump everything together, so you can't really say, okay, I want a digital forensic technician and get that classification. It doesn't quite work that way. It's not that clean. Growth is expected to be 28% between 2016 and 2026. So that's quite a fair number of jobs just within that one classification. And for those of you who don't know what an information security analyst does, they would work with computer companies, financial companies, businesses, consulting firms, and they would be the people who are responsible for carrying out the security measures to protecting the networks and the systems. So that's kind of the cyber end of things. When we shift and look at the digital forensic side of things, it's a little bit more murky, and I think that the advisors would back me up on this, that there aren't as many positions available in digital forensics. And she's shaking her head now. You might be surprised then, but that's one statistic I found. Okay. You have to really, to get a handle on it, you have to kind of look at a bunch of different positions, then you kind of have to marry them together to come up with a figure. So geteducated.com, they're predicting that computer forensics and crime investigators will grow at a rate of at least 22%, and then probably higher than 27% by 2018. Now that's not necessarily, they're doing that by combining the growth rate for private investigators and then computer-related support. So I don't know that that's necessarily true. But if we look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics for digital forensics, the closest job that they had was basically forensic science technician. And they were projecting a growth rate of 17%. So that looks good. Now when we drill down on that, it's only about 2,600 new jobs in 10 years. So realistically, oh goodness, that died. I think it's going to do that because it's going to shut itself off if I'm talking too long. Maybe I'm just supposed to be quiet. And if I talk too fast, let me know. It's a habit from being born in New Jersey. Sorry to anyone who's from New Jersey, but that's where it comes from. I don't have the accent, only on a couple of words, but I do tend to talk very quickly. So that number is 2,600. So when you frame that in terms of our students, If we have new digital forensic students who are coming in, they may find it very difficult to break into the field. If we have our students who are already in the field, our LEOs as we call them, they're going to find that our programs are perfectly aligned for them to move laterally or to move up within the organization because they already have a position in the field.
And I'm sorry, what's the LEO?
A LEO is a law enforcement officer.
Oh.
So that would be somebody like, let's say you have...
They're all named Leo.
Yeah. So weird. It gets really confusing for the advisors when they're going, are you Leo? Really? And I saw this even, a long time ago when I was working as a news reporter. What you would have is that within law enforcement, you have somebody who starts out as a trooper or, a junior, whatever officer, and then they kind of move up, and then they move to sergeant, and then when they needed somebody to do for digital forensic, and it was very early on, they sent them away for training. That person came back, they were trained to use NCASE or FTK or one of the other tools, and then they went over to the corner and they became the digital forensic officer, and they were in charge of everything. Well, as it's expanded, the need is expanded, they're pulling from within their own ranks to train people. But that doesn't mean that if you go and you receive training from NCASE that you completely understand digital forensics. You just know how to use the tool. So that's where our program basically provides that basis and that foundation so that they understand what it is that they're doing, why they're doing it, and everything behind the scenes, as opposed to just go out and get this artifact and then review it and assess it and write a report on it. So that's where LEO comes in. So I don't think necessarily if you're coming into the field, it's going to be difficult to break into it, especially if you don't have experience, which is something I'll address in a little bit. But there are jobs available. And if you go on Indeed and you look at how many are available for that same classification, there were 47 jobs. Now, are they all accurately categorized? No. Do they need experience? Yes. But we are still providing a lot of what they need within our programs so that they would be able to successfully apply with the experience component. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is that our students who are coming in are looking to us to provide them with education. They're coming to us because we're an industry leader, and they're coming to us because they realize that cyber is great because there's basically a 0% unemployment rate that's supposed to stay there for probably the next 5 to 7 years at a minimum because of all of the new devices. And even with automation, and this is something where I think a lot of people have had, been coming to me and having this conversation, well, what about automation? Isn't that going to mean that we lose jobs? At one of the conferences I attended last month, the person had a very, very interesting perspective on automation, which was that automation is just going to change how we, our cybersecurity professionals, security professionals, do our jobs. It doesn't mean we're not going to be doing our jobs, we're going to be doing them more efficiently, and we're going to have higher functioning that we're going to need to do, basically a higher tier of education, a higher tier of understanding, and we're going to be the curators of AI. So that's kind of an interesting perspective, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, why do I need cyber if they're just going to automate everything and have AI do everything? They don't need me. And I don't see that being the case at all. I tend to agree with that speaker who said we're going to be curators, and definitely that means that the education component is going to be absolutely critical, because you're going to have that broad base and not be as specialized, and then kind of work your way in to figure out those new technologies as they become available. Because as those new technologies are becoming available, you're not going to instantly be an expert. So you have to have the foundation, and that's what our programs are providing. So, the deep dive, and I have a lot of programs, so I'm going to say that the deep dive is going to be kind of an overview as opposed to a deep dive. In the certificates, we've got the cybersecurity certificate, the CFDI, incident response, and software security. And cybersecurity, far and away, is our highest enrolled certificate. But when I get into the programs, you'll also see that's also the highest enrolled program as well. So it kind of follows through. The cybersecurity certificate, it consists of 5 courses. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts of what you have to do to get it. Digital forensic investigation techniques and Foundations of Cybersecurity, which I've got to say, I just absolutely adore that class. I think it really gives our students a good overview by touching on all of the topics, allowing them to explore them in greater depth. And even our most seasoned students who come in and then take Foundations of Cybersecurity, they always come away from that class and they say, wow, I didn't know that, or I never thought about it that way. And so they come into the course. Some of them will come into the course and they're like, yeah, you're going to teach me something? And then by the time they get to the end of the course, they're like, wow, that really opened my eyes. So absolutely love that course. And you're going to find that that's a foundational course to almost everything in our cybersecurity program. They also take networking and security, intrusion analysis and response, and then ethical hacking. So for the cybersecurity certificate, you'll find a lot of this will carry over into the undergrad program. They need to be able to evaluate computer networks and information security needs of organizations. They need to basically measure the performance of security systems in those organizations. Troubleshoot, maintain, and update security systems. So we're kind of focusing right around that security system, and all of that is at the enterprise level. And then they also are supposed to, as one of the learning outcomes, implement continuous network monitoring and provide real-time security solutions. And I really like that learning outcome because it focuses on the fact that it's not just taking the snapshot that day or just doing the baseline analysis. It is saying that security is an ongoing process. And it's not a set it and forget it. You have to always be diligent. And to a certain extent, it's kind of like education within this field. You have to always be looking for what can I do next to improve my skills so that I can stay relevant. Then we have the Computer Forensics and Digital Investigation Certificate. And this certificate requires students to take 4 classes, or just to take criminal law, anti-forensics, and network forensics, saying that digital forensic investigation techniques and then operating system forensics. And it's not a set and forget it. You have to choose to take 2 electives, like education. They can take mobile forensics, white collar crime, cyber crime as well, so that I can stay relevant. 2 of those. And similar to the cybersecurity certificate, we've got some great learning objectives with the certificate as well. And this focuses mainly on them learning about the criminal acts, the criminal state of mind, everything to deal with criminal conduct, and then also looking at civil matters, and then how to manage evidence, and then conduct the investigations. So they're looking at investigating crimes that are perpetrated on the internet, so you've got phishing and social engineering and email and all of those, but also looking at white collar crimes. And then, of course, they're looking at specialized areas in digital forensics, so data hiding, anti-forensics, cryptography, and then steganography, which for those, the cryptography is, of course, secret writing, and then steganography is hidden writing. And then they need to basically show how you can manipulate digital images, audio, and video. Then in our incident response, and that's fairly well, and we've got 13 enrollment in that right now. These are current as of yesterday, by the way. Incident response, we've got 1 enrolled in that certificate, and then software security, we've got 1 enrolled in that certificate. Maybe the advisors can speak on this after, basically how that fits into, cybersecurity and the degree, and whether or not that's kind of indicative of people are moving towards the degrees as opposed to choosing to get those certificates. And so, the cybersecurity, it seems to me to make sense that they're getting that because they're getting that along the way. With respect to the incident response certificate, the courses that are required in that are a little bit higher level courses in comparison to the cybersecurity and the CFDI certificates. They're taking some of the same courses, but then they're also adding security scripting, Python, emerging threats and defenses, or cyber analysis and implementation, policy analysis and implementation.
You need to jiggle.
I need to jiggle. Yeah. Oh, not that kind of jiggle. Okay. I'll be very happy when my notebook comes and I can actually feel confident in setting it up with my settings the way I like them. So then we have the software security certificate. Students in this take that Foundations of Cybersecurity, information systems analysis and design, and then security scripting with Python, and ethical hacking. Then they get to select one 15-week course, and that needs to be either C++ programming or Java. So that's a slightly different emphasis because we're looking at the software security, and they actually are doing a fair amount of programming. The learning objectives are actually quite similar to the learning objectives for the other certificates, so I'm not going to go over those.
Tony's got a question.
Tony's
got a question.
Yes.
Hi, I just have a question about certification and certificates.
Okay.
This industry has a lot of certifications. And
Correct.
people are impressed by those letters.
The alphabet soup.
Do the certificates or bachelor's degree, do they lead to more knowledge to help people to get that certification, or are they two separate things? Like some people get their certification first and then they hop in and start getting certificates.
The certificates are basically designed by us, and they're not necessarily going to lead to certifications. Is some of the material going to be the same? Yes. Could you use that as a foundation for having that knowledge to sit for an exam? Yes. But the certifications in the industry are specific to the companies that have designed them and then offer them. And typically that information, you know, for example, the CISSP has a number of domains, and each domain has certain, you know, material that you need to study within there and have cold, and then you have to go sit for the exam. This is going to give you a basis for it, but is it going to prepare you to sit for one of those? No, it's not. It's completely different. And I think the best way to describe that is we have education, they're offering training. And I find that that's a really big distinction that is something that we need to focus on a little bit more with our students, because I hear a lot in the courses, well, you're not training me. My job isn't really to train you. It's to enlighten you, it's to expose, it is to allow you to experiment, and then it's to teach you how to do research so that you can then know how to problem solve and communicate. And that to me is very different from training and saying, you need to go memorize this and then sit for the exam. And two totally different levels of learning. And I think both have a place. I mean, the certifications definitely have a place. They show that you have been able to learn that material, and in some instances sit for the exam if you have a very good memory, or you've learned the material and you've applied it. You know, in the case of the CISSP, there is a requirement that you've worked within the industry for a period of time. So you can't just, you know, take a training course for 5 days and go to Orlando and then sit for the exam. I personally like the ones where you've got to have that experience component, because very early on in my career, I would see a technician who sat for the A+ certification, and they had read the book and they sat for it and they passed the exam and they had the nice little A+ that they could put on their resume, but they couldn't actually swap memory in a machine because they had never done it in the field. So there seems to be, at least for me, that was my early experience, there was that gap in knowledge and practical application. So our certificates are different, just a grouping of courses, so that if we have somebody who says, oh, I already have a bachelor's degree, but I want to say that I know about cybersecurity, they can get one of our certificates. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
As we're talking about certificates, there's one that is meant for people outside of the field, and I just wanted to make sure that people knew about that the MBA, the accounting students can get a certificate, but it doesn't have the expectation of technology that the ones that are geared towards the professionals are. But I think it's something that everybody should have working knowledge of, and that certificate gives them that.
And we also have, I just found out about it 2 days ago, there's an enterprise. Oh, he's smiling. Everybody look at Bob. We have an enterprise, what is it, Enterprise Security Fundamentals, I think, certificate that was approved but has not yet been developed. And we've had students who are asking about it.
Is that at undergrad or graduate level?
Undergrad.
Oh, perfect.
That's
And-
gonna be kind of like the MBA one where they
Yeah.
don't have to have the
Exactly,
background.
exactly. It'll introduce them to the landscape, introduce them to terminology, and be a practical use for them so that they can apply it to their daily lives.
Right.
Um,
And have a much better understanding of it.
Exactly,
Oh, that's
exactly.
great.
I mean, I personally think that they should be teaching cybersecurity literally from the time you're in kindergarten all the way up through. And I think if they offered it that young, and it would become part of the culture, we would not only help with our skills gap, but I think all of us would be more secure in general, which would be a good thing. Okay, so the undergraduate degrees. I have to flip back here. I'm going to do this so that it doesn't turn off. The undergraduate degrees, we've got the Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity, and right now we have 385 students enrolled in the Bachelor of Science. And the enrollment has held steady over the last couple of years. I mean, you get peaks and valleys here and there, but overall it's been steady. The cyber total is 426, so that would include our just certificate programs, correct me if I'm wrong, and then also I believe our badge students, correct?
I don't think
Does that include badge or
I
not
don't
badge?
think so.
It doesn't
I don't
include badge?
think so.
Okay. So the bachelor's in cybersecurity is 120 credits, and it begins with an overview of information technology. So you get, the students take courses in Intro to Computer Systems, Intro to Operating Systems, TCP/IP, and then it moves into cybersecurity. So they get that foundation of networking and computers, and then IT. Then it moves into cybersecurity with foundations of cybersecurity, operating system security, cloud computing security, the networking and security, mobile security, wireless networking, and then ethical hacking. So you get that broad foundation within the industry and your kind of tech knowledge, and then you build on it with the cybersecurity specific courses. And in the learning outcomes for the Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity, when a student leaves here, what we want them to be able to do is to be able to evaluate a computer network and information security needs of an organization. Be able to assess cybersecurity risk management policies in order to adequately protect an organization's critical information and assets. And then, of course, troubleshoot, maintain, and update enterprise-level information security systems. But also, we want them to be able to formulate, update, and communicate short and long-term organizational cybersecurity strategies and policies. So it's as much the technical part of cybersecurity as it is the policies that drive the protections, which basically everything is intermingled. So we absolutely include that policy component. And I think that, you know, personally, I think that's important because I think a lot of people think of it as, well, it's just tech. And cybersecurity is actually information assurance and tech and risk management and everything else, all of those other fields that are components of it. And you really don't have a good cybersecurity posture, and you're not going to be secure unless you look at that whole landscape and you take everything into account. Otherwise, you're just looking at pieces of the puzzle and you're not putting them all together. And then our Bachelor of Science in Computer Forensics and Digital Investigations. Right now we've got between 300 and 350 students, and enrollment is steady there as well. They start out with criminal law and then criminal procedure. Then they move into the networking fundamentals and those intro to computer systems and operating systems. And then they move back into criminal investigation and digital forensic investigation techniques. Then we move them, kind of shift them over into the foundations in cybersecurity, malware forensics, the anti-forensics and network forensics, and then white-collar crime. And then we have them end with either a forensics internship or an elective. And the forensics internship, I think we have a difficult time finding and placing our students in internships because, again, similar to what we see in all of digital forensics, there just are not a lot of opportunities. And also those require our students to be present. It's not something that you can do in that online environment because they have to be physically there to do the work. And as well, if they're working on a digital forensic investigation, that may extend beyond the period of time that they're in the internship. So I think our most successful students are the ones who already have a relationship with a law enforcement agency or organization, and then they can successfully go into an internship within that organization where they already have an established relationship. For our students who are going into forensics and don't have that established relationship, I think most of them are choosing and opting for the elective. Am I correct?
Out of necessity. I mean, they will look for internships and find that there aren't any where they live. Depending on where you live, there are certain hubs of forensic activity, and if you don't live near there, there's not much opportunity. But even if you do live near DC or somewhere in California where there's more options, if you don't already have experience, they're not going to accept you into an internship. And also some of those internships require certain background because it's an active investigation, so they don't want just Joe off the street being involved in an investigation that they're trying to prosecute, because that might affect the case outcome. So there's a lot of obstacles for fresh students who are not already in the field to get that internship. So they try and they try and they try because they know it would be really helpful to have that experience, but they can't get in the door. And so because this requirement is an either or, either an internship or a technical elective, they are forced to take the technical elective option because they can't find and set up an internship. It's kind of sad.
And that's one of the things that's indicative of the workplace as a whole in cyberspace, cybersecurity and in digital forensics, is that experience component. Almost all of the jobs require you to have experience. And so in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about something new that I'm trying to put together so that we can offer that to our students. So, but Linda.
So one of the things, just to give a little historical perspective, when the cybersecurity program was started, our assumption was that cyber would go like this and digital forensics would go like this. But in truth, digital forensics is also growing. And well, the numbers are going up. I mean, when we get the reports from Ellie, it's not growing like cybersecurity, but it hasn't gone down.
Right, it hasn't gone down. I would say it that way because when about the time that TrueEd launched, we saw all of our programs increase, and so there was a lot of forensics. Yeah. That people who weren't in the field thought, well, I've got this discount, like now's the time to go for it. And so it went up, and then it just kind of
leveled off,
plateaued.
Yeah.
And so as many students as finish the program and graduate is as many are coming in new. It stays very balanced, and it has for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Where
so
there was excitement, and that brought it up, but then it's maintained. Yeah, it hasn't gone down, which is interesting because there's still a good mix of LEOs and military students who are already doing the work coming in, and they need the degree. I hear this a lot. I just need my degree for my promotion.
So that's really better.
But we
better students in that.
Yes,
program.
because they have experience. But we still do have a good number, and more so lately that I've seen, a good number of students completely fresh to the field who think, I love watching forensics files. And they put that in their application. And yes, great, you have an interest. So let's introduce you to this and let you get in there and play around with it. But they don't have the experience already, and that's what I've seen has been an obstacle for those students because they want to get in the door, but the door won't open no matter how many times they knock on it.
We've had a few students get internships at the Leahy Center upstate.
Yeah, luckily some local Vermont students who are able to travel up here and physically be upstairs on the 3rd floor have been able to do that. It's a very small amount. I mean, out of 300 and something, it's maybe 2 students. But.
And I think that's basically because we're an online program, that's where we have the problem giving them that practical experience. Right. Now, because of time, I'm going to just move forward to the graduate because I really want to get into that discussion about the capstone and then the new thing. So in the graduate programs, we've got the Master of Science in Digital Forensic Science, current students 125. This is where we're seeing enrollment is steady, but there's been a slight uptick in our class sizes from 4 to 6 to 8. And that's something relatively new. It had been kind of steady, then went down a little bit, and then now it's gone up. So that's kind of nice to see. That's 30 credit degree, and there are courses in scripting for digital investigations, operating system analysis, incident response and network forensics, mobile device analysis, and then of course all of your civil litigation and principles of digital investigation. And then there's also a capstone research thesis. In the Master of Science in Information Security Operations, enrollment is 80 students, and that's enrollment steady with 12 students per new cohort.
It's still relatively new, so that's
Yeah,
actually pretty good.
It's still relatively new. Those students start out in a course called Managing Risk in IT Organizations, and then they continue into game theory, security design and architecture, threat and vulnerability analysis, and operations and management, incident response. And it ends with the War Games capstone. And they also have to take 2 electives. But what I really want to get into is the capstone, because when I get to discussing challenges, this is where I think you'll find it interesting. In the capstone, we have a virtual environment where we actually simulate, to the best of our abilities, a real-world scenario where they are pitted into 2 teams, red and blue, and they have to defend their own network, but as well attack the other team's network. So it's pretty much they're getting experience. And what's really been interesting about that is it kind of puts together and allows them to use everything that they've taken in the course up until that point. But also it ropes in what they do in their daily work lives, because most of the students in the ISO are working in the field. Or they've come in as career changers and they've got enough experience to be dangerous. I think is the best way to put it. And Brittany's nodding her head, so I know that's true. They have enough experience to be dangerous. What I'm finding is that they really like that experience. And I think that's something that we need to do a little bit more of and kind of pepper throughout our courses, so that they're getting not just that we have a virtual environment and they're using the virtual environment. I think they use the virtual environment actually probably more to do experimentation and analysis in the DF programs than they do in the cyber programs. The cyber tend to be that they're using the software within the virtual environment, but it's fairly scripted what they have to do for their lab work. Whereas in the ISO, because of this War Games capstone, they're actually defending vulnerable systems. They start off with a network that is completely vulnerable, and they have to patch everything, install software, change passwords, and do everything that you would have to do in the real world. After they've had a couple weeks to do that, they then start attacking. And I know that program directors, this won't be new to you, but last week was absolutely fantastic because I had my blue team literally blow away my red team. And it was great. I mean, as the observer sitting there, it was. I've got to share it with you because it was just fantastic the way that they did it. They were able to get into the red team's AD and SMTP servers, and then they set up new accounts in my name. And what was really just priceless was the fact that red team didn't catch it for a day and a half. So that tells me what they were doing. But when they did catch it, I got the email message saying, "Professor, why are you in our equipment? We can't get in. Can you please log out?" And I waited. I just basically did a prompt and said, "Are you sure?" And they didn't quite get it. And so I had to give them an announcement and say, "Hello, guys. You've been breached. It wasn't me." But it was very, very interesting because I was able, in the discussions, I'm able to watch what they're doing and see what they're talking about. And I've got this one team that is going, "Yay, we did it!" And they've got all of these log files and everything else. And then we've got this other team that's sitting there going, But what it really became by the end of the week was a really great exercise for them to realize how difficult it is. So we're doing all of this, but when you're in the real world, it is really difficult to defend and against attackers. So as part of the exercise, we also have a reflection component, so they're able to reflect on their experience. So I know it's getting short on time, so I'm going to try to wrap up as quickly as possible. But just I wanted to tell you it's a great experience, and that's something that I think we need to bring more of into the programs. So in line with that, just going over the challenges. There are a couple of challenges with the programs that I've been able to identify, and I think we're doing a good job. I think that in the future, as we kind of go into the next model of what our programs look like in cybersecurity and DF, I'm calling them kind of version 2.0. Aligning with industry needs is going to be critical to maintain the success of the programs and to maintain the enrollments, and then also to attract new students. So that includes TruEd and the partnerships there, and having those really get a sense of what industry needs are, and then translating that into what we have through TruEd, but also having an advisory board so that I'm able to identify, as well as the people who assist me, what industry needs so that our courses are following that. So as enrollments, decrease in some areas, or we have a need to add programs and courses in other areas, for example, information assurance, that we're watching that. So that's something where we really need to keep our finger on that and have a good idea of the pulse of the industry and what they're going to need for their next employees. And I think that I know Duncan's working very very hard on that with his contacts, and I made some contacts at conferences, so that's going to be very helpful moving forward. The other thing is experience, and that's where when our students are graduating with these degrees, with these certificates, with these badges, a lot of times they're finding they need the experience component because the degree isn't enough, with the exception of the LEOs who are moving laterally or up in rank. And I just want to share with you briefly, because I've spoken with Mika about it, the fact that we really should be bringing an internship online for our students in cyber. And I've gotten the green light to be able to design an internship where we would be able to have it be completely online, which is something that I haven't been able to find elsewhere. Most internships are traditional, but we will partner with businesses, small and large, or small and medium-sized businesses, as well as small government offices, to do everything that we do in our coursework for them. So our students would work with them to do the risk analysis and the vulnerability assessments, and then identify what they need, and then at the end provide that business or that government with basically a roadmap within the best practices of the industry, to be able to put that in place so that they are more secure. So it's kind of a nice partnership and a nice marriage of what we have to offer with our students, but it'll be great for them because they'll be able to say, hey, I've got experience. And I see that being the next thing of where we need to move, so that it's not just training, but it's the education and it's the application of everything that they've learned. But we're also giving back to the community by doing a good job and acting as ambassadors for the field of cybersecurity. So that's all I had today, because I know we're short on time. So does anybody have questions?
Just one quick question. Looks like
Yes.
you're drawing a line between information assurance and information security.
Well, there's no lines to be drawn, because everything kind of gets stuck in this giant pot, and it overlays everywhere. But I think, in looking at what other colleges and universities are doing, a lot of them are breaking out that information assurance component into a defined program. I don't know that we necessarily need to do that.
Assurance versus security, that's where I'm getting confused.
What is the distinction?
Yeah.
A lot of times it's mainly policy distinctions, I would say. That it's a difference between information security being that tech component, whereas assurance is your compliance, your audit, your risk management component of it.
I can see why educational institutions would want to separate them, because they get two different types of people.
They do.
People that aren't tech savvy would go the assurance route.
And a lot of institutions that don't have the virtual environment infrastructure, and that they want to kind of dip their toe into the water, so to speak, and say that they have a cybersecurity program, they're moving towards that information assurance, because it's much easier to implement, as opposed to having to say, oh, we need a virtual environment. We need to develop all the labs in the virtual environment. We have to have the subject matter experts who can do the labs. And then the other thing is that the virtual environment, depending on what you have built, can be fairly static. The next thing, and what a lot of institutions are doing now, is they've moved towards cyber ranges, where you have that virtual environment, and yes, you've got your whatever box that you're using for your computer and servers and that type of thing. But you don't really get in a virtual environment unless you're generating the traffic. So for example, in our virtual environment, we generate the traffic. If you want to see network traffic and do a packet capture, you have to launch the attack. In a cyber range, there's attacks going on all the time, and so it more closely simulates what you would see in a real life environment. So a lot of organizations are moving towards a cyber range, and that's something that long term is a goal, but the technology is still somewhat emerging, and there aren't as many defined vendors for it, and they have really, there are quite a few different versions of it, so figuring out what would work with what we have is going to take some time. Yes.
Is there anywhere where we can see like notes on those like red versus blue competitions, or not necessarily yours, but like others competitions like that?
Well, if you look up like capture the flag, a lot of that's what it's usually called. Ours is a little bit different than capture the flag because we're not specifically grading them on whether or not they win or not. So if I was grading on that, blue team would have gotten 150 last week, red team would have gotten a big fat goose egg. Our environment's a little bit different from that because we're acting for that reflective component, and in the middle of it, so they defend, then in the middle of it they have to, and they attack, and then they have to think about how am I going to change my plan. So there's a ceasefire, everything stops, and they have to reassess where they're at, where they've come from, and where they need to go. And you wouldn't see that in so much in a capture the flag where you're just kind of plowing ahead. But if you Google red team, blue team, capture the flag, you would probably be able to find some. And certainly if you wanted to know more about what's going on within ours, I can certainly, do some cut and paste and give you some information on what's actually going on in the discussion. Because they tend to be very specific, and it's really been a great collaborative learning experience because for those who are not as technical, because there are some people in the program who aren't technical, and they're having to learn this on the fly. As the students are executing the programs and installing things or changing passwords, they're doing screenshots of all of it so that the other students can also learn what they've done. It's not just, oh, I went in and I changed this. It's, I went in and I changed this, and this is exactly how I did it, which is very, very nice. It's been a very good learning experience from them. I can't say that'll happen all the time. I would love it, but as the students change, there's a different flavor to it. Definitely this term is very different from last term.
Yeah, I imagine those discussions and little justifications are really fascinating.
They are, and the tools that they choose to use, because some of them are in the field, so they bring in these tools that nobody else knows about, but then they're explaining them to everybody else, and it's really fascinating. A lot of light bulb moments.
In terms of the career changer profile, and comparing opportunities in cyber or digital forensics, I guess my impression was that it was easier maybe to be a career changer in cyber than in digital forensics.
Absolutely.
Is that it still sounds like the experience component is a challenge.
It's a challenge in both of them.
Yeah.
Because if you look at any of the job postings, they want a degree or they want certifications, or you can have a degree and you can have experience, or you can have a degree and you can have a certification and less experience.
Yeah.
But that experience component is always in there. So if you have a student who is just getting a bachelor's degree and doesn't have experience, they're going to have a hard time traditionally, whether it's cyber or digital forensics, breaking into the field. So that's one of those reasons.
It sounds like a harder time in digital forensics.
Oh, absolutely.
I think because of the amount of cyber jobs that are deemed cyber, because it could be a number of different things in that realm, because there's so many different pieces to it. that there's more opportunities available. Just as a general, like, I have a cyber degree, let me do a cyber search. You get more options. Forensics is such a specific piece of that, especially the digital forensics, because this isn't the CSI crime lab where you're testing blood. This is, you know, computers, investigations, all that stuff, and there are less open positions for that very specific slice of it. And so in that way, if you're a career changer and you don't already have your foot in the door for forensics, it's really hard to get that door to open.
And I guess I'm wondering if on the admission side, you talked about people on their applications who are kind of calling out that they might not be aware of how hard it is. Do you think maybe on the admission side we're being as careful about that as we should?
I don't know. I don't know what conversations are being had with those students when they come through to apply. I know I try to have those conversations with all of the new students who don't already have experience to say, you know, what do you know coming into this program? What research did you already do that got you interested? Oh, that's great. Did you know these things? And I make sure that they understand. And this is something that will catch a student's ears, which is why I use it, is, you know, a lot of these investigations are child pornography. And they go, what? And they didn't know that. And it's not every student, but the ones that just thought CSI was cool, I want them to know that this is you know, a great path if you're really dedicated and interested, but you have to be able to stomach a lot of stuff that you probably don't want to see every day.
And it will be talked about in your classes.
Right, and it's not glossed over. Like, that's the work of the class. There's no actual images, but it's talked about. This investigation is because somebody's computer, they found some really awful things, and you have to be prepared for that reality. So I want to make sure, as the advisor, they already got through the door, that I'm telling them that. But I'm not sure if those types of conversations are being had at the admissions level with those who are interested and don't already have a background.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about kind of like dissuading them from attending Champlain.
It's not
I'm just
a dissuasion.
wondering,
it's
we
just
have so many
reality.
different pathways within cyber and digital forensics, and I'm thinking if someone is truly coming in as a career changer and maybe they're not married to an outcome, you know, maybe we could be doing a better job up front of getting into pathways that will give them more career opportunities in the future.
I think that's probably a good thought.
And I'm also surprised that, given the number of job openings in cyber, that industry isn't kind of taking the lead with internship opportunities.
If I had to guess, I would say probably part of the reason, you know, and some of those organizations are not doing a good job on that because they're launching products and getting them to market well before they should be because they're not secure. But as consumers, the consumers want them, and then the companies are saying, no, get it out the door, and that's where we're ending up with a lot of the breach material that we have. But I think a lot of it is they don't have time to deal with them. They want somebody who's already experienced. What I always find interesting, though, is they want somebody who's experienced for this brand new position using this brand new software, and there's nowhere to get experience because it's brand new. So they're asking for something that just simply is not going to happen, which is one of the reasons why I think that if we can give our students a broad base in education where they're doing a smattering of everything that they've done in their degree program, and we do that in a longer internship, they can at least say, hey, I've done all of this practically speaking. And I think that will speak volumes for them because they can list that as an internship with XYZ company or XYZ town that they've partnered, you know, that we've had them partner with. And that will be done all online. There won't be a trad component to that, which is completely different from what I've seen other institutions present when they've talked about internships and mentorships.
I was just going to say really generally how intensive it is for the organization to host an internship in any field. So like the appreciation of the places that will say we will do an internship in anything, like being appreciative of those places is so essential. But like looking at teaching, who the field of educators has figured out a way to operationalize having student teachers in their field and in their classrooms. They're kind of like, I feel like one of the few places that has figured out how to like just build it in. So I totally sympathize with the the struggle of that, because I think it's relevant in so many. From being a director of organizations where it's like we depended on having those, you know, student social workers in our place, but God, it was a challenge for us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, like, for example, when I was in Dayton for the NICE conference, I think it was the University of Cincinnati, they're doing a tremendous amount with internships. But they're all on the ground, and they've kind of got a hub there of technology companies who are then sourcing their applicants from those internships. So that's where they've got that relationship. But they're all traditional. You are not going to school, you are doing your internship. Well, that's not going to work for our students because they're online and they're doing this in addition to everything else that they're doing and all the plates they have spinning in the air. So they can't do that. And that's going to be one of the challenges in trying to create that experience within our framework and give them what they need to make them better applicants, you know, after they've left here. But that's going to be a challenge.
There are pros and cons to industry certifications, certainly, but to a potential employer looking at somebody who has no experience, having a certification may make a big difference.
It does.
On who gets hired.
Mm-hmm.
So providing students with an opportunity to graduate with a certification, I think it's desirable.
So in other words, marry some of our curriculum to where it would map to a general certification.
Actually, it is to a large degree anyway,
mm-hmm.
but for example, what I've been trying to do in CMEP 450, which is the senior seminar, is give students an opportunity to study for a certification. The college doesn't necessarily like that.
The students like it.
So what I've tried to do is add an assignment at the end, which is a reflective assignment, to reflect back on, you know, how were you informed, how did your curriculum inform your certification preparation and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that will. But
what are most of them going for their certification?
Many of them are going for the Security Plus. Two of them are for the CE8, the ethical hacking.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is going for Google Analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some, one of them is really going for, and I forget what it is, it's a very high-end Cisco certification.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority are going for the Security Plus, because that's all they really qualify for at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that they can bring, you know, to an employer, whereas otherwise they would have nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's giving them that next step up from the applicant who doesn't have it.
Right.
One of the interesting conversations I had when I was out in Dallas was with a person who scouts out for institutions to partner with for AWS. And they will provide a full curriculum and all of the support, everything, to have your students work on their platform. And then become certified, which if you're certified in that, you pretty much can walk in the door and get a job.
Two are going for cloud certification through Amazon.
Okay. Yeah, the gentleman approached me and he wanted to know if we were willing to potentially partner with them.
Yeah.
So, but that's something where it's good, you know, there's a lot that needs to go on before we can have that discussion as far as my deep dive into the course curriculum and that type of thing. Taking care of some of the courses that need immediate improvement and become more aligned with our learning objectives and program objectives. No more questions? Awesome, it feels like Friday.
Thank you.
But I've got all my stuff. It's not ideal.